Are you going to cover us up?
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning, Todd.
What are we talking about today?
We are talking about communication. Welcome to the Leaders Cafe, where leaders discuss the latest trends and issues in leadership, team building, and the future of organizations. Each week, we'll bring you engaging conversations with successful leaders who will share their insights, experiences, and strategies for creating effective teams, navigating change, and driving innovation. So sit back, relax, and join us for a virtual cup of coffee at the Leaders Cafe. You know, Todd, I had a late night last night, so I have more than virtual coffee.
Me too. What are you drinking?
Dunkin' Donuts.
I'm still on Lavazza. And everybody else out there who's drinking, you go ahead and put in comments what is your favorite cup of coffee and why? I like the strong, bold coffee.
You know what's funny is the strong, bold, dark roasts actually have less caffeine than a breakfast roast.
Yep. And the funny thing is that you can get light roast all day long at Starbucks, but you can't get dark roast until after the morning.
Yeah, and I love a dark roast. I love a nice. I want it thick.
Thick. Me too.
Thick.
You know, like so your spoon can stand up in it.
Yeah, that works. Yeah. You know, after the time in the service, I don't even care if it's hot.
That's true. I could drink coffee cold. So last night, Brian and I went to a networking event and hosted a networking event. And we're going to be doing some of these networking events around Southern California. Unfortunately, if you guys aren't in SoCal, it's going to be hard to go. But there was a lot of fun. Got to talk to a lot of cool people, see some old friends. And I got a new book out of it. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah. Is Your Network Working? By John R. Dade.
Is your network networking?
Is your network networking? Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was kind of cool.
You know, John's a good guy. He's been on a couple of shows that we produced at Sitch Radio. And just awesome guy. So if you're into networking or want to get into networking, highly recommend that book. It is available on Amazon. I don't have a link handy, but John Dade is the author. Is Your Network Networking?
Put it back up there. Oh, covering John's name. Anyway, so it was good times. And but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're going to talk about effective communication and how you need it to lead. What I mean, we always say this, right? Like even like, and we'll go back to emergency management here for a second because that's what my background is. But we always say like the first thing on these after action reports is always communication. And I asked the question a lot: was it communication failure of the verbal communication or the communication from the top down? Was it the failure of the communication systems, the radios and whatnot? It's a really broad term. What does it mean to have effective communication, Brian?
You know, steering away from comms equipment and getting into one-on-one or one-on-team, one-on-client communication. It's effectively saying everything that needs to be said so the person understands your point of view and you understand their point of view. Nothing's left unsaid. There's no gray area if it's going to be effective. Just because it's effective doesn't mean it's going to be received or happen. They can say, F it, I'm out.
Yeah. I mean, I think I like a lot of the stuff that the problems that we have in organizations. I really do believe it comes down to communication, and it's a two-part, right? Like one of it is the person ready to receive the message? And then the other side of it is the message being relayed effectively.
But we can't always wait till the person's ready to receive it. Hey, how are you feeling today, Todd? Are you ready to listen?
I don't mean in that aspect of it. I mean, I'm talking about like, are they distracted? Are they doing other things? Are they, if you're talking to somebody in the middle of typing an email or something, are they going to hear what you have to say? That's what I'm talking about. Ready to receive. I don't mean
That
like
that makes perfect sense. But you can control that as well, right?
right.
Let's meet in a neutral area, free of distraction.
But I mean, even happens between like you and I, right? Like we'll be talking to each other on the phone or something, and then you have to. Somebody walks in the room and then I, hey, are you talking to me or are you talking to them? You know what I mean? So that's what I'm talking about, having that ability to receive the information, let alone understand it.
Right.
So now I know things that you talk about a lot when you're in communication is differentiating between verbal and nonverbal communication, and written communication is completely something we don't really get into right now, but I want to get into like obviously verbal is using your voice, and nonverbal. Why though is nonverbal communication almost more important than the verbal communication?
I love the nonverbal. I love having face to face. On the phone, I would rather do a video conference because I can see at least a piece of them and soak in their nonverbal communication. For example, if I'm talking to, say, my video editor and he's sitting back in his chair, arms folded defensively, and just, not really, I can tell he's not paying attention. He's not, as you put it, ready to receive that. Right. And I'll stop talking because 9 times out of 10, he should be taking notes. And if he's not going to sit there and take notes, then we've got a bigger problem because, cutting 8 minutes of video down to 2, there's a lot of communication that happens there. And I love picking up on the nonverbal. If you guys watch past episodes, you'll see me sitting up, leaning in. And yes, you're not in the room with me, but I'm engaged with Todd and what Todd's saying. And I want everybody that watches this to understand that I'm engaged.
And 2 things on that. One is I sometimes sit here, I do this a lot, this position that I'm doing right now. When I'm engaged or I'm thinking or I'm listening to the person, I'll do this. And although this may come across, and it has to others, as being intimidating and being standoffish, right? Which is the opposite for me, because that's my engaged mode when I really.
But if people perceive that, you can control what they're perceiving, right?
Yeah, but I just mean that's my go-to. I don't even do it consciously. It's a subconscious. That's where I go. And I worked with a guy who was my boss, and when I knew things are going well in our conversation for me, like I'm winning him over on my idea, he would lean back. If he had questions, if he was suspect of, or really wanted to get more into what was going on, he would lean forward into you.
But he leaned back without his arms crossed, right?
I don't know if his arms. I don't think so. I don't think his arms are crossed. But that once we knew he leaned back in the room, okay, we're like, okay, we're gonna get approval for this project. Yeah. So having those nonverbal cues are critical,
right? And not every nonverbal cue applies to everybody. I mean, the simple act of having a piece of paper and a pen ready to take notes lets me know people are ready to take notes if they need to, that they're listening intently, that they don't want to make a mistake. And when I call my staff together, if they show up without pen and paper, I sit there. I don't say a word. And they'll eventually look around and they're like, oh, crap. And they'll run to their desk and grab pen and paper.
It's funny. I had a student one time who would doodle as I lectured. Just never wrote notes, just doodle. And this was a lower grade. And when I gave him a test, he got 100% on the test, right? And I feel bad. I felt bad. I kind of challenged him, and I kind of felt like he was cheating, right? Because there's no way this guy who just doodled all day long would get that grade. And so I told him, I said, You need to take the test over again. And so he did, and he passed. Right. And I realized that his method of learning wasn't taking notes, but it was the doodling. I don't know, it was the ADD issue, but the doodling kept his mind focused on what I was saying.
Well, right. But I think we kind of project how we learn and what we would do in a situation on those in our charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for example, I went to that Daniel Pink conference.
Right.
And he did an entire hour on giving your employees autonomy. And I struggled because I'm that employee who finds the gray area and runs. And I was projecting my behavior on them and that I couldn't trust them not to be here and get their job done. And as a personal learning growth for myself, a little redundant, I had to sit back, take a deep breath, and give them some rope because I wanted to grow. I wanted to be able to trust them, and I wanted to see how they would do with that autonomy. And they were stoked in the beginning, and they were doing a lot of work from home. And then they started coming back to the office because they realized I'm more effective when I'm in the office, and I need to sit down and concentrate to do this. But they can still come and go. I don't care. But 9 times out of 10, they're here.
What are the barriers to communication, and how do you identify them? Specifically, like running a team, and what do you find are the barriers are? And I have a few in my head, but I want to hear your take on that.
You know, first and foremost, what we were just talking about, projecting our own behaviors or our own habits onto others. Like Todd's not taking notes, so he doesn't care. Todd's not taking note. I'm a big note taker in meetings. But not everybody has to. Some people have better memories than I do. Some, it's just the way they perform, but I expect them to be ready to take notes. So not projecting onto them, asking them to reiterate what their piece of the pie is once it's communicated. That way you understand, they have a clear understanding of what's going to be done. One thing a lot of people do, hey, go do this task, and then they don't check up on them periodically.
But to go back a minute, how do you identify those communication barriers, though?
Time. You as a leader need to pay attention. I can't communicate with Jeanette like I do Joey. They're two different people. They're a few years apart in age. They're a few years apart in maturity. And it would be silly for me to talk to Jeanette the way I do Joey. Joey, I have to be a little stern. He's a young man that, is just world's mine. That's his attitude. And he doesn't take notes. And when somebody doesn't take notes and they come back to me, and what was I supposed to do here? That's why you take notes.
Right.
So let's go over, you and I right now, the entire meeting again and take notes. Not that I don't want you to come ask me questions if you're stuck, but I just covered that. So everybody you communicate with is a different human being, a different individual, learns differently. Personal problems at home, no personal problems at home, happy-go-lucky in the morning, not a morning person.
Right.
And not that you have to tailor your business around all of them. When it's time to work, it's time to work in my book. I'm a little old school like that. And when it's time to have a meeting, it's time to have a meeting. And whether you feel like taking notes or not, I expect for you to receive what I'm saying, take notes if necessary, so we can push this project down the field the way our client intends it to be.
Now, let's flip that over. How do you communicate with, what are the communication barriers that you ran into working with clients, and your team?
If a client doesn't effectively communicate what they want, then we have more pre-production meetings. It needs to be crystal clear. I don't want to spend 3-4 hours of labor on pre-production and then go, no, that's not what I had in mind. Well, we want to understand exactly what you had in mind. So we're going to do more pre-production meetings. So we, the entire team, can hear their vision. And then we get together without the client and make sure everybody understands their vision as communicated. And that's all on the same page. And if not, we get the client back involved. This piece, what did you mean? Joey heard it one way, I heard it a different. We want to make sure that, you're getting exactly what you're asking for. And it's kind of a bothersome to them. However, we're not spending their money doing pre-production and go, no, you got to change that. And then spending more of their money to get it the way they want it.
And this is where active listening comes in, right?
Very much so.
Right. I think active listening is more important when you're looking at, it's important all the time, but I think it's critical, specifically when you're looking at something like what you do, serving your client with their needs and desires, specifically for a video production or whatever. Right. In my case, my clients, if you will, quote unquote, are my students. Mm-hmm. And if I need to actively listen to them to understand, and I'm now teaching master students, I'm not the lower grades. But with my master students, I need to hear and understand what their needs are when it comes to doing research, when it comes to doing original research, how they're putting this together. And I can't just assume that they understand what I'm saying in my lectures when I'm doing my one-on-ones with them. And I use a Socratic method of teaching anyway. So I ask a lot of questions and not give a lot of answers, because I want them to go through that process. So yeah, active listening, I think, is one of the most critical, if not the most critical point of communication.
I've got a question for you, Todd.
Sure.
How can I phrase this? How do you, as a leader, how do you find the balance between transparency and effectively communicating with subordinates who ask questions that's really none of their business?
Tell them that
they have. So you just said it's none of your business
in a polite way.
So give me an example. Hey, Todd, I understand the company's hurting and we're scared of layoffs. What are we making every year?
Okay, so that's a little bit different of a question, but I think a lot of times what we hear are, why is this person getting this and I'm getting that, or stuff like that.
Oh no, I mean as a company. What margin does the company have for profit?
Well, no, I'm saying that I think that question is a different question than and that's depends on who you're working for. That might even be public information.
Okay, in our case, it's not, Todd.
Okay,
you're not effectively answering my question right now.
I'm not role playing well enough for you today.
You know what's really funny? It was a book I read years ago, and it basically stated, and this is what I do, and that question I'm not going to answer.
Right. I would tell them that.
A lot of people will try to sugarcoat and mislead because they want to feel like they're answering the question.
Right.
But now you're not being transparent. And as soon as that subordinate or peer or leader thinks, did he just lie to me? You've got bigger problems.
Right.
And then there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm not going to answer that question.
I'm sorry, I wasn't role playing well enough for you.
Yeah, you haven't had your coffee. And dude, it's the way you roll anyway, Todd. It's like, how fast does a truck go? Well, is it going downhill or uphill? And what's the specific gravity in the air? And what's it loaded? What's the PSI of its tires? And let me get my calculator out and academia explain.
Come on, man. I always need more information. Yeah.
But it's funny, that's a great example. You don't always need more information.
No,
I've
you're right.
asked you questions in the past that are like, yes, no, black, white. And you're like, well, and you're trying to spin this. And next thing we're talking about squirrels in the park,
Right.
instead of just answering the question that was asked.
Somebody just asked, who's going to be the next president? They're going to be, I don't know how this works with this conversation, but I have no clue. I don't know. I just find that kind of funny. But this effective communication, going back to what this question is, the reason why I brought it up right now is because, when you're looking at the communication coming from our politicians, you're right. I mean, like, I don't necessarily say that trust them. That's kind of weird, but I'm not sure what to believe anymore when it comes to what they're saying. So I don't even know if anybody. I think they've gotten so slick in their communication that they don't answer people directly.
I think they take stage not intending to answer the question that was asked, but to take the opportunity that mic time to talk about their agenda that they're not even going to fulfill anyway.
Right.
But let's get off politics because that's
Yeah.
just a slippery slope.
Absolutely. So how do you enhance your communication skills? What strategies and tools do you use, or do you teach your employees to have better communication skills?
This is something interesting because it's something I learned at a very young age, freshly out of the Marine Corps and in corporate America. And I use this with customers. I use this with my employees. I use this with everybody. And it's me understanding how I need to effectively communicate with that individual. And then I choose that to communicate with them their piece of the pie. And the burden's on me, but that's okay. Just like my clients, some communicate with me via WhatsApp. Some communicate with me via an email and an attached Word document. Some are in Notion. Some are in Airtable. Some are in Slack. And I'm not here to teach them how to effectively communicate with me. I'm here to serve them. So however they choose to communicate, my team adapts to it. And we create a workflow so we're sure we're not going to miss anything for the first few months until it's a learned workflow.
How do you internally communication between yourself and your staff, or what do you do to you get a new person walking in, and you see you teach them to communicate. So one of your new interns or whatever, what do you do with them?
In the beginning, because they're new, I sit down and have a conversation and I'm observing, are they taking notes? And if they're not, I'll give them a couple of tasks to do. Day one, simple little things to see if they can remember and do those tasks, or if I need to have that conversation about taking notes because you've already forgotten something. But one thing that I do is when employees or interns come to me with questions, I add answers to a Wikipedia page in Notion that I built out. And when somebody comes on as an intern, I share this link with them and we kind of go through it, how it's built and where they can find answers that eventually they're going to have.
Let's talk about the intern wiki, because I think you just brought that up. I think that's a brilliant concept. I don't know if you made it up or not, or if you stole it from somebody else. Either way, I think it's a brilliant concept, and I stole it from you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a selfish thing though, right? It's in the wiki. I'm not going to take time to explain something that's in the wiki that you should have reviewed by now. Or I'm not that person to come ask questions if you're not going to take it upon yourself to look at a resource the company's put together for you. And it's kind of a little bit of tough love. But, everyone likes the open door policy, but some days you don't get anything done because everyone's coming by asking you a question that's in the FAQs or asking you to repeat yourself because they didn't take notes in a meeting. So having that wiki, I spend, 50% less time with my second batch of interns than I did my first batch of interns. This batch of interns, it's like 20%, 80% less time getting them locked on to perform their tasks.
I create a student wiki based on your intern wiki.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing, all the resources they need, links that they need, everything. Instead of having it in an email or whatever. But go ahead.
It's kind of like that paper syllabus, right?
Yeah.
But now they can click a link and go to the page how you want things cited. Now they can click a link and understand how they need to turn in a project or paper.
And I've also put links into some YouTube channels that help answer a lot of questions, like MLA versus APA and all that kind of stuff. And it's a brilliant. Did you make that up, or did you get that from somebody?
No, it was there was a wiki template for internal communications for a fictitious company. It was a template, and I went, I'm gonna try to build this out for my interns, so I don't have to spend as much time with them, or I'll sit here and watch an intern talk to Jeanette or Joey. When they're spending an hour at Jeanette's desk trying to get something done, well, Jeanette's not working that hour.
Right.
They're not being as productive that hour. You know what? That compounds. So as I put this wiki together and the wiki's matured, I see less of that as well, i.e. making that employee, more effective while they're here.
Excuse me. What communication failure can you recall, and what did you learn from it? Like a major one.
I think that one of the biggest failures I've had recently is having a meeting and thinking the person understood what was discussed in that meeting. So it wasn't a clear-cut conversation. And you and I have had those.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we're going to do this. Great. Let's do this. And we assume we communicated everything, but dude, we've known each other for years or a couple of decades. And, and sometimes, we're like, well, he's done it before. He'll do it the same way. And then,
right.
And it doesn't happen, but my fault for not making sure you understand what I expect from you, or vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. I once I start working with people, I go through that same thing where my assumptions, and sometimes it comes back and bite me in the what assume means. And I think that's where I fail in communication sometimes. So that's one of the things I'm constantly working on, is making sure that I've cleared up what my intentions are. It's maybe more deliberate in that part, right?
Well, and I think it's one of those things that if we don't have effective communication, we end up spending more time correcting issues because of that ineffective communication than we would have if we would have just taken the time to ensure all parties involved understood the commander's intent and they went out and did the job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The other side of it too is like, you start working in teams of people who have a certain mentality, and you assume everybody has that mentality. And then you start working with another team, and nobody in that team has that commander's intent I'm talking about. Right. That mentality of understand what that is. And then you have to go, they'll do whatever you told them to do in that particular moment, and they don't go beyond that. And you're like, what are you doing, dude? We had this whole project needs to get done. Well, this is what you told me to do right here, this box. And I did my box.
Right.
You're like, well, that's okay.
Yeah, but now we're talking about government employees.
Dude, I apologize for Brian Colburn's comment on that. No, but it's not just government employees, man. It's just people who, a lot of, if you're not a self-starter and sometimes working with not self-starters is kind of,
okay. If you're not motivated, if you don't care, if you don't, you know, a lot of people are here to do a job, not to fulfill the company's mission. And those are the people that, you know, we typically have a harder time with, right?
Right.
Because it's, I have to put a check in this box and move the folder over there. And the folders are stacking up because Sally didn't come get them, but that's not my job.
Right. Right.
They won't even pick up the phone and say, hey, Sally, you got some work over here. Come get it. Or, hey, I'm going to the bathroom. Let me take this over to Sally.
Right.
It's literally, I did my part.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. You know, Bernard Shaw, and this was a quote you have in our notes, and I love this quote. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were just talking about that.
Yeah.
You know, you can't assume anything. If, you know, the more critical the job is, the more time sensitive the job is, that needs to be communicated. You know, I have Joey working on a video project. We're going to shoot 14 short video scripts. The scripts are all written out, and we set up to do 4 of them. And that's all the time he allowed himself, and all the time he told the intern he would be needed that day. And I'm like, we just spent an hour and a half setting up lights and cameras to shoot where you wanted the shot to be taken, for about 6 minutes of conversation with me and a camera. You know, so now I have the conversation with him. If you're going to spend an hour setting up and an hour tearing down and putting the studio back together, let's knock them all out. There's no reason 14 2-minute videos should take 3 days of shooting.
Right.
It's just, you know, so I have that conversation with him, and now he's on par. We're going to come in and knock out, I think we've got, I don't know, 9 left, 8 left. But it's that analogy. If a light bulb goes out, it costs more money for that janitor or maintenance person to go, oh, the light bulb's out. Let me walk to my storeroom and get a bulb. And they bring the bulb back. Let me go get a ladder. And then they bring a ladder back. And then they climb the ladder, they change a bulb. When I worked in facilities, if a single light went out in a fluorescent fixture, we changed all 3 of them because they were all put in at the same time. Odds of the next one burning out are great within a day or 2. And I don't want to pay that individual 3 times of getting a ladder, getting a bulb, taking the fixture apart, putting a bulb in. Let's just knock it out now.
Right.
And it's that effective communication that I actually wrote out a procedure for. It ended up saving the company a lot of money.
Yeah. Well,
and
that's good communication.
And that's effective communication, in my opinion. I mean, it's not glamorous. It's a flipping light bulb, but you know.
How do you constantly refine your communication skills though? Like, I mean, like,
that's personal development.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think it pains me to say that not a lot of people put as much time as I wish they would into their personal development. You know, and you're going to be like, oh God, here he goes again. I had a conversation with Jeanette. This has been 4 years ago now. And I gave her a book to read. And it's the Little Red Book of Selling.
Oh, yeah.
And now she's had it for 4 years.
She hasn't read it yet?
Right now, she's crushing it because she's in a marketing, advertising sales class. And now sales is important to her. So now she cares. Even though I broke it down to, you're selling every day. Mom, can I have $20 to put gas in my car? Billy, will you buy lunch today? I want Jimmy to take me on a date. Let me go, you know, get his attention. You're constantly selling. Everybody is every day. But now it's important to her.
Right.
So she's crushing the book. So maybe I'll get it back someday.
Did it take her 4 years to read it?
She honestly probably didn't start it. She's like, yeah, I still have it. It's in my trunk. Awesome. Awesome. It's in your trunk.
Oh,
So not taking the time for personal development. Last night at our mixer, I had a conversation with an individual that goes, man, our customer service needs help. It's like they have to get approval for everything and they just have no empathy. And I'm like, it doesn't sound like customer service needs help. It sounds like management needs help.
right.
If they are scared to do their job because they need approval for every little thing, that's a management problem. That's not a customer service problem. And he went, and there's plenty of companies out there and contractors and instructors and presenters for biz development. It's insane. And take the time. Investing in yourself is well worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, Brian, I mean, you and I talk about this a lot, and we do. I take myself probably a long lesson learned on this one, but I take personal development like seriously, like not, and it's not just not reading self-help books and whatever. I think that's not what that means, right? It means like really reflecting on who you are, what you do, and how you become a better person, and how you become more efficient in what you do. And today we're talking about communications, how to become a better communicator. And now the good thing is that I have friends like you to bounce things off of, and we have like deep conversations about this a lot. And so I think having that person in your life to be able to effectively communicate with, and
just not effectively communicate, but effectively learn from.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah,
I've learned so much from you over some decades. And it's awesome to have a friend that pushes you,
right?
A friend that makes you a better human being, and that's how I look at you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I look at you the same way. But like the idea here though is that we're brutally honest with each other too.
Well, and you know what? Going back to communication, I think in today's environment, see, he's sitting back. Oh, he just leaned up. I'm glad you're listening, Todd. I think in today's environment, people are scared to be honest. You don't have to be honest and mean. You can be tactfully honest to get the point across, but everybody's worried about hurting your feelings. Well, Todd, if I have an issue with you, I'm going to let you know I have an issue with you because of our friendship. I know I can push you harder than I could push Jeanette or Joey. I can communicate with you differently than I can communicate with them. However, I have to communicate with Joey maybe 50% of that harshness to get through to him, to where Jeanette, it's like, hey, Jeanette, can you do this? Yep, no problem. 5 minutes later, done, whether it's a Teams message or a text or whatnot.
Right.
And in business, not every conversation is pleasant. I mean, I had the fortunate pleasure of working for an old school guy once, and we would have sales meetings and we were salesmen. And when the company needed extra money, he would have one of these old school sales meetings where we all sucked. We were all going to lose our job. We better get to our desk. We better sell 10K today each. And it's got to be this product that I want out of the warehouse. And it's like, he's yelling and screaming and we're worthless. And that was his way of communicating. I don't take offense to it. I understand he's stressed. I understand he needs money coming in the doors. It is what it is. I'm going to go back to my desk and do my job. And if I don't believe in what he needs me to get rid of out of the warehouse, we've talked about this before. I'm not going to push it on clients that aren't going to be able to sell it.
Right.
So I didn't. But it's okay to go, damn it, Todd. How many times do I have to tell you to put something on the calendar, dude?
Right.
It's been 5 years. Calendar. We can have that conversation.
Right.
To where, Joey, hey, Joey, you really need to start using your calendar more. I put some tasks on your calendar. You did not accept them, acknowledge them, or complete them.
Right.
And these tools are here for us to collaborate, communicate, and work effectively together. So let's pay attention. Let's get it done.
Well, next week, we're going to talk about empathy and emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I'm cool with empathy.
For those who are not watching but listening, Brian went right to the knife hand, which is if you're in the military, you understand what that's all about. There's no empathy coming from those guys at all, huh?
No.
You're like, what? You didn't fold your t-shirt correctly? T-shirts go flying all over the place.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, Todd, I want to ask you
Uh-huh.
for self-improvement,
Self-improvement.
self-development, what
Okay.
are you reading or consuming right now?
well, so again, I'm reading this one book, After Natural Law. It's really getting into the philosophy of public policy. So I mean, that's exciting work, right? It's like everybody's like, oh my god, how can you read that stuff? I like it. This is what I'm into, and I haven't started this yet, but you, Brian, gave me 2 books yesterday, and I'm going to get into those. The 7 Crucibles. I'm going to start reading this. Looks like a quick read, and then Do Good Work. A simple acts of social purpose and drive success and well-being. I read the little intro to this, and I found this is really interesting. So I'll be consuming those this week. So that's what I'm reading. How about you? What
For the record, did everybody listen to how Todd belittled me with that communication? This looks like an easy read. Like a Marine can't read a in-depth book. Thanks, DeVoe.
It's like 12 pages long. It's like
oh, and the sad thing is I couldn't get through it. There's just a lot of football analogy. I'm like, I'm out. I'm not a football guy.
that he gives me recycled books that he doesn't even like.
At least I gave them to you. A year ago, I would have sold them to you. But it says $14.95. No, Todd, the knowledge in that's worth $29. I just started a book entitled Yes and I learned about this book on another business podcast that we produce at Sitch. And you know me, Todd, I will encourage my show hosts to go to improv classes.
Yeah.
This book was written by the famous improv troupe, or a few people from the troupe at Second City in Chicago. And if you're unfamiliar with Second City, remember Chris Farley's motivational speaker bit? That was actually flushed out and developed at Second City on stage there. So many people from SNL have come through Second City to refine
John Belushi started the Second
their
City
performance. They now teach improv to C-suite level executives, etc. And this book was a way to bridge that gap if you can't get to Chicago to work with them or fly them out to work with your team. And it's really cool. I'm in chapter 2. I just started it. But how many times, Todd, you and I, perfect example. Hey, Brian, I want to do a live event. And I'm like, yeah, but.
Right.
Yeah, but. And that so goes against the improv rules of yes and. Yes, Todd, I understand you want to do a live event. Yes, and we really need to sit down and budget that out and see what that looks like.
Right.
Instead of saying, yeah, but, and just dismissing you. I can yes and it. So that's what I've taken so far. Still reading it. I'm digging it. I love the improv. So
digging it. What are you consuming for fun?
Nothing right now, dude. Oh, actually, I take that back. Last night after our networking event, I came home and watched all 90 minutes of Survivor. It's my guilty pleasure. I've watched every single season, and season 45 is upon us. Started last night, and I don't want to see any hate for it.
All right. Season
and you?
45. Well, like I said last week, I'm still watching Ahsoka on Disney. I think that's I'm a Star Wars fan. And they did a really good job with it. Although there's some questions I have to ask because I haven't watched a lot of the cartoon portion of the Star Wars stuff, but they gotta have I think I should say God sounds kind of like it's like a imperative. But the good thing is I have a 20-year-old who has watched all of them, and I can ask him questions and he will answer them for me, so to keep me updated on some things. But really well done, better than most of the other Star Wars series that Disney has put together. And that I think is really great. And other than that, I've been doing a lot of more documentaries as of late, and so on the music end of things. So I like music documentaries, so that's what I've been consuming.
Awesome. And it's empathy and emotional intelligence next week, huh?
Yeah, EQ, my friend. That's the big thing right now, right? Because without EQ, you know, business. I'll tell you one thing. We could give you a little teaser for next week. In business and in government, for that matter, EQ is more critical or more important than IQ. It's like
it's more important than what?
IQ, your intelligence quotient.
Oh, gotcha. I missed a syllable there. No, I absolutely agree with you, and I don't think I've shared this short story on this show, but when I was promoted to corporal in the Marine Corps, I had to go to NADSAP, and it was like Navy alcohol, drug, and substance, blah blah. So
who hasn't gone to that?
I could identify which of my Marines was an alcoholic. That's
all of
an
them?
oxymoron, exactly. But the one thing I took away from this was you choose your own feelings. I can punch you in the arm, Todd, and you can laugh and be like, ah, or you can get angry at me. But that's a choice you're making.
Choose your own feelings.
And when you think about that and EQ, it's pretty spot on. You know, my wife can do something wrong. I can choose to go, well, that was a failure. Let's dive in and do this together and be happy and cheery about it to get the job done. Or I can, what the hell? I'm going to the bar. But I'm choosing those feelings.
Well, chew on that for a little bit, and we'll talk more about that next week. And hey, man, until next week, you take a wonderful day. Be safe. And as my daughter always says, stay hydrated.